Greetings from Oregon.
Nice, nice. How are things up there with all of this COVID mess?
Oh, it's fine.
Fine.
It's all good. It's a about I'm sure the same as it is everywhere. We're doing our best to keep to ourselves and go out as little as possible. And it's fun with the young ones not in school and then running around, and both me and my wife trying to teach at the same time. It's a special joy.
Are you having to do the online things? Are you able to record and submit or?
Yeah, no. Luckily, the Oregon Department of Education says that nothing has to be synchronous. Everything can be asynchronous. So,
Okay.
I'll do videos and just kind of post assignments and check in with my kids every once in a while. But no, I don't have to do anything any particular time. That's not true. I have to there's 1 hour a day where I need to be available, but it's not like I have to hold classes regularly. Just an hour a day, really. That has to be locked in.
Very, very cool. Well, thanks for being with us. I'm Brent. You and I have conversed a little bit through Facebook,
Yeah.
and glad to have you here. We have mostly our guys. We have the director of Acapella Texas and Acapella Gold with us, Katie Dane. You might know her already, but she's with us as well. Anyway, glad you're here. I showed everyone the little bit of a bio. It was somewhat dated. I think in 2014, about as far as it went, maybe. But I will, when Westminster burst on the scene, of course, I was aware of Royce at the time, and had been coached by Royce a couple of times, and kind of was experienced with his technique to a certain degree. And anyway, and then kind of a name I didn't recognize kind of burst on the scene, and that was Justin Miller. And then things just kept going up. So I think I speak for all of us, certainly for myself, that Westminster has been a joy for us, and certainly a benchmark that to be measured against. So I want to thank you for your music.
That. Thank you.
Thank you for your music and all the things you all have brought to the table.
Yeah.
So if we'd like to kind of pick your brain tonight a little bit, and it'll be several things. Scott's already kind of mentioned. I'm going to ask you some questions, and then there's going to be some chance that people are going to be posting in the chat about questions that they have specifically as well. We'll just kind of get to them as we can.
Hit me.
Yeah, sorry, Katie. Acapella Unlimited, not Acapella Gold. I just noticed that. My bad. I don't know where I even got that from. I don't know who that is.
Acapella Gold, I think, is a Sweet Ad Quartet champ.
Maybe it is.
Several years ago.
Maybe it is.
Brett, before you get started, I just want to make sure, Justin, I would like to record this if you don't mind, but it's strictly going to be for our internal use.
No worries. Go for it.
Okay, I just want to make sure you're cool with that.
Yep.
Very cool. So if you'll give us a quick rundown of kind of who you are, background.
Sure.
And then we'll jump into some things.
I'm Justin Miller. I was born in a hospital in Northridge, California. Am I going too slow? Anyway, so I'm the son of a barbershopper. My dad, John Miller, is the bass of two AIC quartets, Grandma's Boys, one in 1979, and the New Tradition one in 1985. And because he was very active, I have been very active in barbershop. Well, I've been very aware of barbershops from an early age. I went to my first international before the age of 2. And I think to this day, I'm 36, turning 37 this year. Had LA convention been a thing, I probably would have gone to close to 30 conventions. So I've grown up in barbershop. I also, had a lot of musical training growing up. Played piano and took voice lessons. I was in orchestra in school and choir in school. I went to Chapman University and had degrees in choral conducting and music education. Joined the society officially when I was 18, and that was when I joined the Masters of Harmony. and won a gold medal with them in 2002. Around that same time, within weeks of me joining Masters of Harmony, a couple of the younger guys in Masters that were my peers at the time decided about Westminster and kind of hooked me in. And so that was all kind of happening around the same time, my joining the society officially and Westminster forming. And then cut to several years later, Westminster had just won with Royce in 2007. But it was a little bit of a tumultuous road, and we decided to kind of part ways. And I was finishing my conducting degree at the time, and so everyone thought it would be a good idea for me to be the kind of interim director of Westminster, because I was a member of the group, I knew the culture, and I was also getting this academic musical training and could kind of lead the group. And it became evident fairly soon that it would probably be longer than an interim thing, and we started making better plans. And a year after that, we went to Choir of the World in Llangollen in Wales and won that. And then the following year, we went back to the BHS International in 2010 and won that contest. And I've just kind of kept at it. I also teach high school choir and have taught it in a variety of schools in my career, and now I'm in Oregon. So hopefully that was detailed enough and not too boring.
Sure. So, most of our questions are most likely going to be Westminster related, and I know you've moved on from there, but
that's a tricky situation, especially in the world of COVID, but sure.
Right. So you mentioned just a culture of Westminster, and if you could you kind of let us see what a little bit of that was?
Yeah.
What would you describe that as?
I would certainly describe it as very fraternal, in both kind of the universal term, but also in the collegiate term as well. And I would say it's even true nowadays, even though the average age is 30 or over. It's still very fraternity-like. It's still very lots of jokes, lots of dirty jokes, even during rehearsal. Finishing rehearsal and lots of barbershop chapters go and drink beer at an afterglow or whatever. But the rate in which people would get together outside of a rehearsal night, and just get together because they're part of the same team, part of the same crew, part of the same fraternity. That was really important to the growth of Westminster, because we are so comfortable together, because there's such camaraderie, there was such friends, more so than just barbershoppers. Barbershoppers all have a certain bond, have a certain camaraderie to them. But what I found with Westminster is that encapsulated most of the ensemble, not just cliques, but most of the ensemble could fit into that friend group, and a lot of stuff. We would do stuff together very, very often. It's now as the course has grown, that's changed a little bit, but telling dirty jokes in the risers is still true.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about your audition process here in a minute, but would you say that some of the fraternal part of the chorus is because they're closely related in talent levels, or how does that play into the?
Talent may have something to do with it, but I think similar life experience, and it's not even just similar age range. Although I would say Westminster's age range tends to be perhaps smaller than some barbershop courses that may have some young guys, but they also have people in the autumn of their years. But it's just kind of, I don't know, a similar sense of humor, a similar vibe. And because that culture is so strong, there have definitely been people that have been talented and fit the demographic of what we're looking for. I mean, although we're a little older now, we still kind of think of ourselves as a youth chorus and try to recruit that way, and so that we're infusing new life into the Barbershop Harmony Society. There have been some people that have not enjoyed, or maybe thought of what I think of as a fraternity, they just may think of as immature, and they don't want to be a part of it, even though they might be a talented singer, they might enjoy the musical product. They're like, yeah, no, if this is the process they used to get there, then I don't want to do it. That doesn't happen often, but it's occurred.
Okay. How do you go about, how does Westminster go about recruiting? Do they have recruiting nights? Is it word of mouth? How does that go for you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's word of mouth. I mean, I think when a new person comes in, suddenly there's a new circle of friends that's opened up to. And so just people bringing in their peers, bringing in people that they meet. We try to have a pretty strong social media presence, so that plays a role into it. But one of the things that we do is that every time there's a new season, whether it be, okay, we're gearing up for division or district or international, or maybe just we finished division and now we have a couple of months until the next concert, and so we kind of break things up that way. And so every time there's always like a kickoff rehearsal. There might be like 7 kickoff rehearsals a year, but we try to bring a lot of excitement, even if it's kind of manufactured. And every time we have a quote unquote kickoff rehearsal, that's kind of a pseudo guest night as well.
Okay. Scott, that answer your question? You have anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think that's good. I mean, does that, just a kind of a follow-up, does that, Justin, mean that you typically discourage guests on nights that aren't the kickoff rehearsals, or is it just kind of you make sure that everybody knows those are the nights to bring people?
Those are nights when we try to be especially kind of, cheerleader, hoorah, bring your guests. And guests are welcome anytime, but I think from a leadership perspective, those are the nights when we really push for guests to come. But like auditions are rolling, so it's guests are welcome anytime.
So we have had a couple of guests on, I should say more than a couple, but one of them was Steve Armstrong of TNL, and that's been 3 or 4 weeks ago. But in our last coaching session with Mark Hale was able to come down and work with us some. And just something he mentioned was TNL and Westminster had the most difficult audition process in the society, is what he said. And so
Mark Hale said this?
Yes. And so I just would like to get a taste of what your audition process is like.
Okay, so the audition process there's 2 steps. And actually, Mark and I, both directors of Masters of Harmony at one point, Mark was, I would still to this day a mentor of mine, I would say. The Masters, I'll just say, the Masters has 3 steps. And they're kind of similar to Westminster's. There's an additional vocal assessment. There's a visual audition to make sure people can look good, perform on the risers, don't have 2 left feet for the difficult choreography. And then there was a 3rd step, which was like a depending on what era it was either someone had to record themselves singing in the chorus a particular song, or quartet auditions. Westminster only has the 2, the vocal assessment, which is with me, where I'll do a number of vocal exercises, from testing the range to make sure they're singing the right part, or maybe after hearing them, maybe there's a part that they would help the chorus by singing. Maybe they want to sing lead, but they have a really good ear, so maybe you can sing baritone, bring a good melodic quality to the baritone section or something like that. We'll also do ear training things, making sure that they can hear odd intervals and be able to just recall them back and sing them. And I would say that the majority of people that see me, I pass. And it's not because I'm easy necessarily. It's just because that step is more to identify red flags. Like if this person has significant vocal health issues, or they're just really green, and the couple of suggestions that I give them, they have no concept of what I'm talking about, then we might say, hey, go take some voice lessons or go sing with another local chapter. Certainly in Southern California, there's a ton of them. And then get some experience. And if you want to come back, come back. So that's the first step. The second step is really the difficult one, because we'll have them sing a segment of our contest uptune and contest ballad, whatever they happen to be in that cycle. And they have to sing it in a quartet with the other section leaders. So if they're a bass candidate, they have to sing with the baritone, the lead, and the tenor section leader. While myself, the bass section leader, and essentially the entire music team is just listening.
Mm-hmm.
And then myself, the bass section leader, bass assistant section leaders might give feedback. If they're awesome, we may pass them the first time. But I will often tell candidates in my first initial say, this is what the next step entails. 9 out of 10 times people do not pass the first time. And I think maybe even the statistics are lower than that. So the section leader will give feedback. They'll come back, they'll try the quartet a second, third, fourth, fifth time until the section leader is cool with them being in their section. And sometimes I will veto, be like, they're not really ready. But because that responsibility is given to the section leader, most of the time they're like, if this person is not going to make a positive contribution to my section, I don't want them. And so we will work with them over and over again to see if they can improve, to see if they can hit kind of the benchmarks that we want them to be in terms of balanced blend of vocal production, expression, you name it. Sometimes if they've made enough progress, we'll pass them. Maybe they're not at our ideal yet, but if they've made enough progress, if they've shown the initiative to come back time after time after time, after we said, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, in a positive and hopefully uplifting kind of way, then we'll let them in. So there it is.
Awesome.
Boxers.
Any other questions, guys, regarding the audition process specifically?
Katie did have a question about the kickoff rehearsals. If we go back to that for a second, she asked, she said, through the kickoff rehearsal, how do you cut through the masses and the social media presence in such a highly oriented, performance-oriented community?
I mean, I think for the kickoff things, those are, there'll be, a Facebook event created, and then it's just the responsibility of the members to share it and invite people to it. With the social media stuff, I think we're always trying to put some sort of content out there, whether it be a new video or just, a Throwback Thursday kind of thing where we put another video on there just to keep the social media presence there, to up the amount of likes, up the amount of clicks, so that when a kickoff happens and there's a Facebook event that is shared, that there's a little bit more credence to it, and someone might be a little bit more inclined to attend if they've seen the social media presence. So I would say for the kickoff rehearsals, it's still more about old-fashioned picking up the phone, or new-fashioned sending a text message to people that you know and love that you think would enjoy being part of the chorus.
So as a follow-up to that, when you're doing the recordings that you're putting out in the lead up to those kickoff rehearsals, are you just recording little clips of, just putting out little clips of rehearsals, or what are you specifically putting out there?
Sometimes they'll just be like, hey, this is what we're working on, and there it is. A tag of something, or it's old performances that have been recorded, all of the above.
Regarding performance standards and how you keep members, accountable for running, whether that's contests or shows? Are those different? And if how do you keep your standard at a very high level?
They are different with international or contest. I would say international more than anything else, because I mean, I hate to say it, but it's like we've reached a point where we don't really worry about division and district. I mean, we work at them, but it's not like we're like, oh, we have to be, at the top of our game. Truthfully, this last district where we premiered from now on, the up tune from Salt Lake City, we did it with no choreography, which I think a lot of courses would be like, it's a contest, we have to put. It's like our goal, what we knew where kind of the end of the game and the line was, we just wanted to get the song out there so it could further mature, so that it had. I think the only choreography it had like one like look right and then a look left and then like a school of fish kind of thing. And then like when things got crazy at international, we just said, hey, everyone just go crazy on your own, and then I spread at the end. This international, we did have every man had a kind of sort of re-audition. Everyone had to sing the quartet again, and we had the Newfangled Four act as that quartet that everybody sang with instead of section leaders, so section leaders could listen, and the Newfangled Four was just there, and like all of the basses would just kind of circle in and out, and then like all of the leads would just kind of circle in and out, so they could kind of step in. Like, do they know what they're doing? Great. In terms of overall expectations, let me go back to the kickoff. We're talking about the kickoffs a lot. We have a attendance policy, and that attendance policy is for any event that you would like to sing on, you need to make 7 out of 10 of the events leading up to it. 7 out of 10. And the kickoffs generally are 10 rehearsals away from any event. And just mandating that attendance policy. And we've held people to the fire. We told them that, sorry, you're at 6, bye. At the same token, there's some people that have been at 5, but they've been like, I can only make 5. These are the reasons I'm only gonna be able to make half. And then section leaders and myself will be like, you're communicating, great, fine, we're cool with it. But some people can be flaky, especially younger kind of people. And so we have that. And I think that attendance policy, because they're rehearsals, because we have regular sectionals and rehearsals, because I am kind of a stickler for what the expectations of the chorus are, they will rise to the occasion if they are attending rehearsals. Also, when new people come in, I would say once a quarter, maybe twice a year, we take more time than just the warm-up to reteach the technique, where we'll take, an hour and a half, and just, okay, almost like spring training, like baseball players, they'll go on we're just going to throw like this for a while. We're not going to throw full on pitches. We're just going to rebuild the mechanics. We kind of do that. And go through, okay, this is alignment, this is breathing, this is kind of the space you want as you breathe in, and the various resonating spaces. This is the placement that's ideal. These are kind of the formants that we want. This is how we want our vowels to be. And we go through all of that so that we're not only teaching new people, but veterans that maybe are getting too cocky, are being retrained. And as we do that, I will often myself, because nobody's perfect this side of heaven, I will check in with my veterans quartet guys that are in the know. I'm like, hey, does this feel right? Because so much of it is about feeling rather than sound. Does this feel right? Do you feel like you're really contributing, and yet at the same time, do you feel like you're not singing because your voice is being transparent within the ensemble? And if I'm checking in with, Guys No See Times, the former members of the Crush Quartet, for those of you who know who they are. Actually, I don't necessarily check in with Newfangled Four Guys because they tend to be too new to the chorus. Really checking with the veterans that have been doing it for 10 or 15 years within the chorus to really know, like, yes, this is what we're trying to create. And so, yeah, we'll do that, like I said, twice a year, maybe once a quarter, depending on what the goals of the group are at the time, and just rebuild the group from the ground up.
Very cool. So you mentioned something that's on my list here to talk to you about. We have embarked, at least had started a journey before this mess hit us, regarding singable consonants specifically. And when I hear Westminster sing, and we played you guys before at rehearsal just to do some listening and kind of picking apart what we heard. There is a stretch in consonants that I haven't heard from anybody else, and it's beautiful. How do you do that?
with a singable consonant specifically?
True. Yes. That's where I'm going to start, I guess. They're so stretched, but nobody cares. They're so good, you don't care that they're longer than you normally would expect.
Okay. Well, there's a number of things that I can go with that. From a technique perspective, I mean, a lot of the execution of those singable consonants is due to the fact that we're trying to train the guys that do the musical line is going to have consistent air throughout the whole line, right? We're not going to emphasize individual words or individual vowels or whatever. And this is something that I'll often say is we want articulation and we want pronunciation, but we don't necessarily want enunciation, if that makes sense, right? Articulation, the way the crisp consonants are, the pronunciation, the way we inflect, but we don't necessarily want enunciation in at least barbershop choral singing. Choral singing, slightly different animal. Barbershop choral singing, we don't necessarily want that. We get the rhythm from from when we get to the vowel and from the crisp consonant sounds. When we enunciate, if I have kind of a meter here, my air is going to, and we want the air to just flow. And if you're on a vowel or if you are singing, whatever, the air is the air, and the air doesn't bite. So we do a lot of lip trill, just to make sure that the air is consistent. And not only in warm-ups, I mean, we'll sing passages of literature, literature of repertoire on just that to make sure the air is consistent, that we're not hearing any. It's just a drone in that regard.
Sure.
So that using the air and making sure that the resonance, making sure the placement is all there, and the singable sounds are just in the same place as any vowel is. And actually, this is kind of a Royce-ism. Westminster, once we kind of figure out what all the targets are and how everything should sound, then we kind of throw it away and try to go from a real natural non-vowel approach where everything is just kind of in the same format. Royce will call it singing with a lot of feeling, where everything is just kind of everything is in that spot, whether it's in ooh, e, everything is and that kind of helps I mean, it's kind of a simplistic way of saying it, but that helps the chorus find the right vocal alignment, the right vocal posture. Relative to the duration of some of the vowels, singable consonants, a lot of that comes from training within Masters of Harmony. From what Mark Hale would teach, the way Mark Hale would interpret. And I think some of that was based on perhaps what Mark heard from even earlier incarnations of the Masters of Harmony, particularly from Greg Lyon. It's funny, in Westminster's virtual chapter meeting about a week and a half ago, I did this whole thing where I went back and I played old thoroughbreds and I played old vocal majority and then early masters, and kind of tracked this stuff and the progression of the barbershop choral style through the years and what ultimately led to Westminster, including like Louisville Times and Toronto Northern Lights, and like pretty much like any chorus that you can like connect the dots in like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of way. Like we listened to them. And that early master stuff had a lot of it. I'm thinking of like in 1990, Masters of Harmony saying "When Day Is Done," and there's a big climax, "When Day Is Done," and I can imagine Greg Lyon just, and this is a very Greg Lyon gesture, and there's a full second of just done, and it's just awesome. And so I think a lot of the expression of how much vowel and how the vowel, I keep saying vowel, I mean single consonant, sorry, how the single consonant can be expressive. Going back to, I'm talking about Greg Lyon a lot. He's one of our greats. In a coaching session actually don't know which course it was, it doesn't really matter. But he said, the word was love, and he said, give us the quantity of L that is equivalent to the quantity of love that you feel. And I've used that direct quote in rehearsals a number of times. When we say love, there's an expression there. It's not only musical, but it tells a story. The quantity of L itself tells the audience, and perhaps even informs the singer, of the quantity of love that they're trying to put into the story of music.
Very cool. So and I think maybe some others, I know I've been able to watch some of the rehearsals at different internationals. This past international, just listening to, I told some of the guys, just listening to I happened to just walk into the bass section. I was like, listening to the bass section was worth a trip to international for me. I mean, I have never heard anything like that. How do you get there? I mean, I know there's a lot of steps, but
Sure.
How is it that they sing so much like one voice? And not just the bass section. I would say that every section of Westminster tends to be that way.
I mean, that's the goal.
How is it different?
We say that. We say the goal of the section is to be as one voice.
So can I do a little caveat in here?
Yeah.
And the reason I'm going to is we've had some coachings with Rob Mantz and Steve Scott. Others are talking about the natural place to sing. When we sing what I consider as a natural place is when we hear more differences in the sound versus a single sound, I think.
Right.
It is more natural, and sometimes it's a better sound, but I would not say it's a unified voice.
Right.
If that makes sense. So can you walk through that?
Yeah. So it is impossible for one man to sound like another identically. And if they were to attempt it, that would require, let's say two men were trying to sound the same. That would require one or both of them to sacrifice some elements of their voice. So the goal is not necessarily to sound like one another. The goal would be to sound like a third thing. And so we work a lot to make sure that the resonance and placement and the process in which the singers use to sing is the same. And if everyone is using the same resonance, the same process, the same placement, then the resultant will sound unified. Now, there is some micromanagement that has to come into place. There are going to be some naturally bright voices where we might need to darken them a little bit. There might be some naturally dark voices that we need to brighten a little bit. But in theory, that's what we're going for, is not trying to sound like each other, but just maximizing each man's voice, each person's instrument, each person's resonance and placement, and then creating something new with it, right? Creating, 1 + 1's got to equal 2, right? That's the goal. We don't want it to be 1. We want it to add on top of each other. That being said, the real magic of the bass section, well, there's 2 things. One, and this goes to, I'll tell both the Masters bass section and the Westminster bass section. And I do this pretty much whenever I coach as well. I say, basses, I'm going to ask you a question, and regardless of the question, I want you to answer lead. The answer to the question is lead. Are you ready, basses? Yes. What part do you sing? Lead. Because I think some of I sing bass and and that extra little tension prevents some of the natural expansion of the voice. So that's one thing. The other silver bullet is Brett Littlefield. Brett Littlefield coming in to coach the bass section, who just, for those of you who know Nightlife and Masterpiece, Brett Littlefield is a freak of nature. And he's also an incredible inspirer and teacher of bass singers. And he has a way of just speaking the bass's language where, we'll sit back and he's like, no, that's not it, guys. We just got to let the horses run. And we're like, let the horses run? What the heck is he talking about? And then all the bassers are like, yeah, we're going to let the horses run. And the next time they sing, it's like, what? That shouldn't have worked. So those, yeah, there you go.
Got it. So I think a lot of the other questions, is there any, before I hand it off to Scott or any others, is there any others who are want to ask questions about singing technique specifically? There's going to be some more administrative questions about how far you prep ahead of time for contests and shows and things like that. But is there anything technique wise that anyone wants to ask at this point? Okay.
Maybe, Brent,
yes,
I do. It's not necessarily technique, but more so in the rehearsals as far as sectionals. Is sectionals time for working technique or music or?
Yeah, I would say sectional. I think every chorus kind of goes in hills and valleys, right? And anytime we're I feel like we're at a trough, it's because in sectionals, everyone's working notes. And when we're at a hill, when we're kind of an apex of productivity and musicality, and it's when the singers are prepared enough so that sectionals are not for notes. Sectionals are for musicality, sectional unity, vocal technique, all that stuff. Any time that we need to go to a sectional to fix notes, it's a waste of time. So yeah, I encourage the sectional leader and I encourage the chorus, like, hey, sectional, sure, you might go to a sectional when you're learning a new song to get on the same page, but nobody should be teaching notes there. It's a chance to get on the same page and immediately start working artistry to get the vocal craft in your voice in this particular song. So, yeah.
Okay.
Justin, would you say?
Oh, sorry.
Justin, would you say as you're leaning up to a show or to contest, is there a period of time where you pretty much say, okay, we're pretty much, in my head, I'm pretty much done with technique. We're going to focus almost solely from here on out on artistry? Or do you still work on technique even like up the week before show or contest?
I mean, we're never prepared enough for a show to stop, you know, because there's always that one song that, like, for whatever reason, it got, the learning tracks got delayed. And so you had like 3 weeks to scramble to put it together. And so no, shows are a different thing. But contest, and the answer is no. I think there's always time to work on technique. The trick is how you do it. And there's a couple of, like, you know, Westminster's near Los Angeles. There's a lot of, you know, Hollywood-oriented people. There's actually some professional actors in the group that bring a lot of acting technique to when we have to do theatrical things. And one of them talked specifically, and he actually wrote this whole treatise. It's almost like a dissertation on performance things within the barbershop chorus realm. Talking a lot about the difference between the heart space and the mind space. And so often technique is taught using mind language, meaning like analytical types of, yeah, anyway, versus heart language, which is more metaphor and more through feeling and the senses and emotion and those kinds of things. And as we get closer to the time and we want to stay in the heart space as much as possible, let's, you know, you might say something like, if something's flat, you might say, hey, can this line be more effervescent? You know, can there be more, you know, can there be more sunshine in that line, you know? To trick the singer into doing the technique we want, but not saying, hey, we're flat, let's keep the pitch up. Because that's going to just be like, oh, now I have to keep the pitch up. No, that's not. That's going to create more problems than the one we want to solve. So the closer we get to the day, the more heart language we will use to fix mind elements. Cool. If that makes sense.
Sure. I'm going to ask you one question and then turn it over to Scott to filter through some of the questions that we've got over in the chat. When you guys are singing through, you know, choose a song, and do you feel like that you become a different character for that song, or are you trying to relate to it as yourself? For instance, news, you know, the Newsy set. Were you someone other than yourself, or were you, you know, how did you tap into?
That's really interesting. There's a number of ways to go about this. I think, first off, for both Newsies, Precedes the Day, and for From Now On, both of those followed a loss, if you will. Seize the Day came in 2015 after we got a silver medal in 2013. And then From Now On came in 2019 after a silver medal in 2018. And there was some degree of thought that the story could be this redemption story where both songs start somewhat downtrodden, and there's a little bit of self, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, kind of towards the end of the intros, and then there's a sense of rallying the troops, and then halfway through chorus through the song, it's kind of party time. And in both instances that was premeditated, particularly with From Now On because of the success of Seize the Day. Because at that point, the guys didn't need to be characters. The guys could act, but drawing on their own emotions of having this like, man, we put all this effort in and then we didn't reach our goal. And so they could essentially be themselves. That being said, there was also significant work to come up with a character. Fully knowing that each man could be themselves and it would work because of the repertoire selection. Now, other songs, no, I actually don't. Westminster doesn't really ever do things where they're not being themselves. Everything, even if it's a very dramatic piece, I wouldn't choose repertoire for Westminster that would force anybody to not be themselves. If they like create a character on their own, that's okay. But I think it's for Westminster, and I'm speaking solely for Westminster, not for any other chorus or what I feel about what barbershop choruses do, just for what I know about the guys in my group, that they're best when they're with themselves. And it's very like, this is my story and I'm telling the audience and this is what I've gone through and this is what I want to convey. That's when it's the best.
Cool. Scott?
So, yeah, Justin, I got about 20 questions here, and I want to be respectful of your time. We've only got about 12 minutes left in the hour when we're going to try not to keep you over here because we want to respect over your evening. So I'm going to try to blitz through these kind of enlightening fashion, and we'll see if we can tackle them if you don't mind.
Sure.
Eric asked, how does Westminster keep the interest through the year, especially on non-contest years?
Well, participation is going to wane. I would say at Westminster's normally around about 50 guys is a good Westminster. 50 is a good Westminster. And then contest that builds excitement, and then we'll bulk up to 60, 75, this last time 100. But like Westminster on an average show is probably about 50 dudes. How do we keep that interest? New music, projects like a recording project. If we're performing a lot, even if it's small local shows, a lot of performances will keep guys engaged. If we're just like rehearsing and the next thing is 6 months away, then it's not a lot. So small local things will keep guys on. Bigger projects like recording, and then Westminster has toured internationally several times, 4 times, and we're planning to go to Japan. It was supposed to be 2021. But then international got canceled this year, so our swan song was going to be in Los Angeles. Now it's going to be in Cleveland, and so we pushed that international tour back to 2022. But it's kind of that mix between small things you can do often and big things to do down the road.
Gotcha. I'm gonna divert just on a rabbit trail for just a second because you brought up something that kind of segued into a question that I had personally, and that is, can you just give us an overview of what it's like, what the schedule's like in an international year? When do you start working on your pieces? When do you say, because you just mentioned guys that ran from 50 normal guys up to 75 or 100. When do you cut off and say no more? Walk us through the process if you would.
I mean, it varies from year to year. I'll go ahead and talk about this last one just because it's the most fresh. We got our Uptune a year before. So we got our Uptune in the summer of 2000. 18. And the same was true with Seize the Day, actually. We got it in the summer prior, and both for Seize the Day and for From Now On, 2015, 2019, we premiered those songs at the district, and with some ballad. Then, for both those contest cycles, we got the ballad in February, March time. Yeah, ballads tend to be a little bit easier to learn, perhaps harder to refine, but easier to learn. And I think we would, at the beginning of the year, the first, rehearsal of the year, start to reach out to, people that have been in the course before, see if they're willing to come back. I would say generally the cutoff is maybe April-ish, May. No. So, okay, we have a mandatory retreat that's pre-international generally, and that's generally the beginning of June. Middle of June. Because that's mandatory, we will have I mentioned the 7-10 attendance policy. So 10 rehearsals prior to that retreat is really when the final push begins. So if they're not able to make 7 out of 10 leading into that mandatory retreat, then they can't go.
But before that 10 weeks start, do you guys have choreo down already? You have the music learned, obviously. You're working on art. You learned
the choreography evolves until the day of, really.
But I mean, have you started the basics of it 10 weeks out, or learning that?
We started the basics of it. Actually, From Now On, Aaron Howden came out and did a coaching session in November after the district. So we put it up on stage with no choreography, and then we started adding it immediately. It changed. I mean, it changed 3 or 4 times, like wide scale change 3 or 4 times. And we were even tweaking moves. The contest was Friday. We were fixing things on Thursday.
Yeah, we can relate to that. We've done that once or twice. So shift gears a little bit. Tell us about you personally. How have you evolved as a director from the time that you started, like for instance, you started Westminster till now?
I mean, when I first started, I was being very technical and clinical because I think as I mentioned early on, I was finishing my conducting degree at the same time I started Westminster. So I was really kind of doing what I was being taught, and then I could evolve over time to now. I would say my direction is one of 2 things. One, I'm either trying to look like the music. I'm not necessarily trying to conduct, but I'm trying to look like the music. Or I'm trying to show the singers what their body should be doing. So often, my breath gesture will be here versus like, okay, and sing. I try to avoid doing that unless it's an uptune. It's kind of presentational, and show things with kind of the vocal tract and think things. There's a lot of this kind of thing happening in more ballad and choral kinds of things. So that's how I would describe my evolution, I would say.
Okay, cool. Let me shift gears again. Go back to like when you're rehearsing and you're coming up to a contest and things are getting a little stressful and it might get a little bit rough and you might have to crack the whip a little bit. How do you keep the guys motivated and positive?
What's the saying? Floggings will continue as the morale improves, or something like that. It goes back to, I think this quote is attributed to Jim Clancy. What's hard work is fun when improvement is evident. And so it's all about making sure that in the rehearsal there's something to hang your hat on. And I am horrible at wanting to cram a few things in at the end of rehearsal so that the end of rehearsal always feels kind of like bleh. And it's a pet peeve of myself that I can't seem to get to move past. But that being said, I always want to make sure that there's something in the rehearsal that can be celebrated, so that after the fact, when I'm like, oh man, rehearsal sucked because the last thing we did was awful, that I could always go back, and we have like a private Facebook group that only the members run. So I'll go in and be like, guys, remember when this happened? That was awesome. See you next week. So that's something. And I also think we record rehearsals a lot, both video and audio. And to be able to post progress and being like, man, listen to how cool that sounds. Listen how great that looks. Being able to have that evidence of that things are going well is important.
So as a director, how do you plan week to week? Like your rehearsal plan for tomorrow night's rehearsal, are you working on that as you're driving there still, or do you have a pretty good idea of what you're going to do when you leave the previous rehearsal? Or are you 2 weeks out or an hour out? How does that work?
I plan a month out. I plan 4 weeks ahead. So I know, and that way kind of guys can see, okay, by this point, this is expected to be memorized. We've rehearsed on it a couple weeks in a row, and on my thing, which I publish, it will say it's learned here, but you can use music. You are note perfect. I have 3 phases: familiar, learned, memorized. You're familiar here, you can use your music. It's learned here, you're note perfect, but you can use your music. You are memorized, you are note perfect, and you do not use your music. So the guys can see ahead, okay, I gotta get that, there's my goal. But then of course I publish it weekly, so they can see what's happening this, and if, like, let's say something happened here, and so I need to adjust this week, then, when this week goes away, and then I add another rehearsal down here, I might edit this to say, yeah, so it's constantly evolving, but I try to map it out so guys can not just plan for this week, but they can plan for the following couple weeks.
And then how often do you have to deviate once you get into rehearsal?
Once I get into rehearsal, I never actually follow my agenda. I would say actually, I would say there is not a single rehearsal that is exactly as it is. I would say there's almost every rehearsal where I would either have to cut a song, I always plan too much. I'm like, okay, we're not going to get to that one this week. Or, you know what, the energy is different. So what I was going to rehearse first half, we're going to rehearse second half, but even then I don't publish what we're like the order of what we're rehearsing. Like, these are the songs we're going to rehearse, and maybe I'll get to these, the mission numbers we're going to work on. Mostly just kind of like, hey, dust this song off so you're prepared for it. But I would say every rehearsal will change a little.
All right, we got 2 minutes left. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Scott, I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you for just a second?
Sure.
Is there a chance of maybe you sending me a template of what you use so I can kind of see more of your schedule?
I can send you one, sure.
That'd be awesome.
I moved, and so
Sure.
So most of the rehearsals have been led by assistants for the past 9 months. But I can
Sure.
send you one from a year ago.
Yeah, something that's just a template.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, unless you guys have an agenda to get to, don't worry about my time.
So I'm a little bit curious, at least as far as coaching is concerned, because at some point, we've talked about bringing in different coaches and giving different voices and such. And like I said, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I assume that considering the fact we've been international 6 times in the last 9 years, you probably at least heard us once or twice. Is there something that you've caught, you listen to and go, I would tweak this, I would adjust this. If I was coaching them, here's what I would do.
I couldn't articulate that well because I wouldn't have heard a recording recently. But the one thing that I would say, and I think that every barbershop ensemble needs improvement on, and every single one is just breath management and making sure there's more active air in the tone. There's always air in motion. And I think barbershoppers are so keen on ringing a chord that one of the ways to get that, when you're singing tags, is to maybe pinch off the air a little bit so there's a little bit more brilliance. But in the choral realm, it's just a matter of keeping that air flowing and keeping it going and keeping it going and breathing twice as much and maybe twice as long as you think you oughta. And just that's something for me that every course can improve on.
So one of the things that we're talking about trying to see if we can do, particularly that's coming out of Zoom here, is trying to see if maybe we can do some virtual coaching with some coaches around the society, and just using yourself as an example. Would it be, as someone who does coaching, would it be advantageous if we were to do, we alluded to this earlier, do a recording, video and audio recording of us, working on a song that we're working on, send it to you and say, take a week, look through it, jot down some notes, and let's get together by Zoom in a week or so. Or would you rather say, I'd rather have do something in person where I can have hands-on experience? Is there value to the former?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're bringing in a coach, there's expense there, and not only the expense of their time and their fee, but then air travel and hotel potentially. My son's trying to get in the office. He's knocking on the door. So sending a video recording and an audio recording and a score so that someone can listen to it at a distance. Because as a director, I'm always too close. There could be some obvious error that I'm just missing because I'm worried about other things, that part of the plan or whatever. So I don't think it would be a bad idea to then have someone say, hey, you might want to try this approach. This is a vowel that is, really, incorrect, a chord that really needs to be tuned. And again, maybe it's just something that we're not worrying about, but to another listener, it's a big deal. But that being said, there might be something that could be lost in translation over that thing. Because then the coach could say, hey, try this. Yeah, no, that really wasn't it. Try it again. Oh, yeah, you're closer there. Versus if you're just saying over Skype or Zoom or Google Meets or in writing, some of that could be lost in translation. I think it's definitely worth considering.
Yeah, it's something we've been kind of noodling around. We'll just have to see if we can get something together that sounds good enough, and we'd be like, okay, I don't mind sending this to a judge or to a coach. Guys, I'm going to, I blitzed through trying to look at all the chat here, and I may have missed one or two. Is there any follow-up questions that anybody has before we let Justin go? Because his son's obviously trying to get in, hang with him here.
He's fine. We've been playing all day. Literally all day. He's fine.
Are you doing any coaching in your downtime, Justin? Not that you have.
Yeah, I mean, I did a little bit. I mean, this past year I coached Boise Chorus. I was going to coach Northwest Sound in Seattle before this all kind of turned sideways. Not a lot, but a little.
Hey, Justin, you said we in Japan and assistant directors covering. Are you still the director of Westminster?
Technically, I'm still the director of Westminster. They were going to have auditions for a new candidate now. So, yeah, those aren't happening. And because, again, LA was canceled, which that was going to be kind of the final thing. We won last year through the Swan Song. But now the Swan Song is in Cleveland. So, of course, it's like, well, we can't do that without Justin. So that got pushed down. So I at least have another little more than a year to lead things from afar. And now that we are doing Zoom meetings like this, I may as well be in California because none of them are getting together in person. So I've been leading these meetings for Westminster. Yeah.
And so it's been mostly just talking about technique and talking about certain specific things that you can do without singing?
Actually, no. It's granted, because I was not used to leading week to week, because assistants were doing that, I was kind of being hands off. But they weren't doing anything because I think they're like, well, they didn't know what to do necessarily. So when I took back over, which was frankly only last week, We've only had 2 of them. I started with like barbershop history. I think I mentioned we listened to thoroughbreds and VM and kind of hear the progression. And so we were able to talk about technique, but it wasn't like we were working on music and listening to examples or doing, I know there's several chapters that are doing kind of virtual sectionals or trying to. Ours is just listening to stuff and talk about it.
So Paul asked,
For now.
Sure. Paul asked, I think where he's going with this is he's curious to know what you delegate to the music team as opposed to what things you handle yourself.
I do way too much myself?
No, he's saying what things do you specifically delegate to the music
team? That's what I'm saying. I do way too much. I mean, the music team is, getting in touch with the members, making sure the members are there, running sectionals. There's a vice president of music who, all, tasked with getting music or learning tracks and taking care of that rigmarole. Unless, of course, it's an arranger or a learning track provider that I just have a good relationship. And it's just easier for me to text him and call him, which is a lot of them. When it comes to listening to, if there's any assessments that we're doing and listening to, the singers, I rarely will listen to anybody. Most of that's the section leaders.
So I'm going to divert just a second. Then I got a couple more questions here that have popped up on chat. But when you're working with and you're getting learning tracks, we found that sometimes guys are picking up things that are the guy in the learning track is doing, and that maybe isn't part of our plan, or maybe certain enunciation and such. Do you have a hard, fast rule? It's like, use this only to learn the notes and the words and get the hell off of it? Or how do you approach that?
Yeah, that's generally it. Trying to encourage them to stop listening to it. And that's why we will record, like once it's up to a certain point, it's like, listen to us sing it, don't listen to the track anymore. And that kind of goes to the quality learning track makers. I mean, there's some people that do a good job and they're cheap and they're fast, but there's a reason they're cheap and they're fast. Versus like a Tim Warwick, who it takes a long time to get in his queue, and he might be a little bit more pricey than some of the others. But I'd rather, plan ahead and pay a little more so they're not having to fix stuff.
So regarding the course recordings, is there a specific point at night where you say, guys, we got to run through this one time to get the recording so you guys have something to work on this week? Or does it just kind of happen organically, and whoever does your recordings, you record the whole rehearsal and then?
There is one guy that records the whole thing. So if someone wants to go back, but there will be some times when, it's at a certain point and we're several weeks in and it's starting to click, that I'll say, hey, can someone record this? Or maybe there's a friend or a wife or a girlfriend, a partner out in the audience that I'll literally toss them my cell phone and I'll say, hey, record this. And then after rehearsal, I'll upload it to the Facebook group and it'll be there. And then people can talk about it. And then I can even go in and say, hey, at a minute 22 seconds basis, at 4 minutes, at 7 hours, it's rehearsing soliloquy. And, baritones, you suck, that kind of thing.
Well, that's kind of a given. So Katie asked, when you took over as the director of Westminster and Masters of Harmony, what were the big rocks that you wanted to tackle? And what were your first steps? Things that can impact repertoire, culture, buy-in, et cetera.
Oh, I mean, when I took over Westminster, I just wanted to make sure I didn't sink the ship. So I don't think there are any big rocks to tackle. If there was one, it would be repertoire. I love Royce. He's a dear friend. He brought so much to the group, but he had a difficult time choosing repertoire. Like, he couldn't make a decision. And so at the time, we didn't have a deep repertoire. So I think that was one of the things is really expanding the rep. And then a year later, when we decided to make the decision to go to the Choir of the World, that was then a real opportunity to infuse some choral genres into the repertoire. And then for masters, it was more technique, and cleaning up the choral technique of the masters. Mark Hale is a genius. Mark is a genius. But Mark is more self-taught. And so I think there over time, some of his barbershop isms were maybe confusing some of the more the laymen within the group. And so I kind of wanted to streamline some of that technique. And the repertoire was here's something. So I was a director of Westminster in 2008. I moved to Connecticut to teach at my own high school that I graduated from. That didn't last. I was still doing kind of what I'm doing now then. But then I moved back to California. When I moved back to California, that's when I took over Westminster, our masters. And my goal then was to kind of take the branding of Westminster this way and take the branding of masters this way. And so there could be some real discernment between these two big choruses. And
was that primarily in terms of repertoire or sound?
More so repertoire.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interject.
No, it's fine. And I think the sound was going to be different just because the masters had a kind of a legacy of what they were, and that legacy of sound was different than the legacy of Westminster sound. So I didn't necessarily attempt to change the sound of masters. I just wanted them to be the best version of what they were. And then to take the branding and the repertoire choices a little bit more this way. So while Westminster, we moved even further into kind of contemporary a cappella and choral, I made masters a little bit even more barbershop than what they were under Mark.
Okay, cool. Zach asked, how do you sift through all the information the chorus will absorb when you have a coach come in for a session, choosing what to keep and what to discard?
That's a good question. Actually, I don't know. I think you just gotta know. When the course gets it and it works, okay, that's something I have to learn to recreate. I need to write down that quote, whatever they said, whatever trick they use. I gotta try to do it. And then sometimes you just the course will do it, and it might sound good, but in heart that it's not gonna okay, for example, this was a number of years ago. This was in 2010, I think. And we brought in Royce, and Royce got a certain sound out of the group, which we needed. We needed that refinement to kind of bring that Royce-ism back. But at the same time, it required a certain extra energy and effort out of the group that it minimized dynamic range. They were just kind of singing at a 6 to a 10 the whole time. Granted, it was an incredible sound, an improved sound. So then it was up to me to be like, okay, we need to take some of that, but not all of it, so that we can have a full dynamic range with the song. So it's just kind of in a real time knowing that's good, but we got to modify it, or that was great, or it's just kind of you got to go with your gut, I guess.
So let's talk about regular repertoire for a second. How many songs do you guys typically keep in regular repertoire? How do you keep it fresh? How do you know how much how much music is ready to sing at a moment's notice? If you got a call and say we're going to sing something next week, and when do you know it's time to retire a song and bring in a new one?
Yeah, I would say generally there's, on a given show, Westminster will probably do about 12 or 13 tunes. knowing that, most barbershop songs are probably between 2 and 3 minutes, and ours are average 5. So it tends to be a lot of music. So there's that. We'll often keep songs for probably about 3 or 4 years. Some only for a season.
Does that include contest pieces that you've done, like ones that you've won with international?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say. I would say it's and generally, our show. I don't want to say our show is formulaic, but there's a certain formula to it. And so, for example, a number of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, we got 3 kind of classic rock tunes. We got an arrangement of Saturday in the Park by Chicago, and Still Crazy After All These Years by Paul Simon, and Mr. Blue Sky by Electric Light Orchestra. And then they've kind of run its course, but we really loved that little mini set, that classic rock mini set within our show. And so we've replaced it with The Chain by Fleetwood Mac, and If, the Suntones arrangement of If, by Cream, I think was the band, and Spinning a Wheel by, I think it's Blood, Sweat, and Tears. That kind of have that same thing. And so it's just kind of, we through, 3 years, the guys were starting to get old, they weren't singing as well. So we replaced them with kind of similar things that could just kind of plug into our show. So yeah, and again, like I said, some things will last a year. Bridge Over Troubled Water lasted a while. Oh, Love That Won't Let Me Go, that went away for 2 or 3 years, but then has come back just because people were recommending it. We haven't sung Bridge Over Troubled Water for a couple of years, but knowing some of the things that are coming up, I imagine that's going to take have a resurgence as well.
And do you tweak those classic songs that you guys have done for a long time, like Oh Love, or do you keep it pretty much the same plan, 3, 4, 5 years?
We'll keep it the same plan. But the thing with it is we have to learn it as if it's new, because there's so many guys that haven't sung it. We can't just be like, okay, we're back. Well, we really have to we have to go into sectionals like we would. We have to spend the same kind of 3-week plan. This week you're familiar. This week you're learned. This week you're memorized. Even on those chestnuts.
Sure. So about an hour ago when we were talking about contests, you mentioned a couple of times where you guys have come in second and the guys have worked so hard and there was the disappointment of doing that. It brought up a question, and that is, when prepping for contests, do you guys ever talk specifically about trying to achieve a score, or is it about the performance or the experience of the audience, particularly as it relates to contest, or what's your approach there?
Score doesn't really factor into it. It's mainly what we want the audience to feel, because if we get the audience to feel a certain way, then the judges will put down the score that's going to earn us the goal we want. So that's mainly where our focus is. I mean, internally, like this past year, I was kind of hoping we would break our own record, but it wasn't. I didn't say it out loud, really. That being said, a number of years ago, this is probably after, I actually don't know when it was, but we had a little powwow, and we said, okay, hey everybody, just close your eyes, and we want you to internalize what you think. I'm going to contest because I want to move an audience. I want to do well. I want to go to contest because I want to make art. I want to go to contest because I want to win. And even the most artsy, they were like, damn it, when you said I want to win, that's the one that lit my fire. Damn it. The ones that were preaching, no, we gotta talk about the audience. They're like, no, I want to win. So there is certainly a balance. And if it ever kind of gets a little too wishy-washy, then you kind of have to pull some football coach level speech and be like, come on, and then
Yeah, go full.
And then they shout too much, and you got to reel it back in and go back. It's a whole balance you have to find.
So do you feel like in the couple of years that you alluded to earlier where the guys were disappointed, do you feel that they didn't give their best efforts and that's why you guys didn't win? Or do you feel that somebody beat you? Or do you feel like you came away with that saying, you know what, we put everything we could out there and somebody else was just better on this particular day?
I must say, in 2013, the Toronto Northern Lights were incredible, and in 2018, the vocal majority was incredible. But to a certain degree, I feel like we beat ourselves, meaning we weren't as prepared as we could have been. In 2013, everyone kind of rags soliloquy I did myself 5 minutes ago, but that was the highest scoring song of that contest. Our Uptune was the 4th highest scoring song of that contest, which is why we lost. The Uptune was first, and it was really treated like, hey, let's get through this, and then we can sing soliloquy. So that,
truth be told, going back to that contest, sitting in the audience, I'm sorry for saying it, but that's what it felt like.
yeah, no, that's absolutely what it was. And it wasn't necessarily our intention. Like, we never talked like, oh, let's just, but we all felt it. And then in, when the vocal majority beat us recently, I think that was just, we had been coaching with Tony DeRosa a lot, and I think our technique pendulum had swung too far in one direction, and we kind of forgot some of our vocal roots a little bit, and it just wasn't a good performance. And I don't blame Tony. We were coaching with him, and the buck stops with me, relied too much on the things I was hearing recently from him, and not really paying attention to what made it successful in the first place. And I think from now on was more successful, and the ballad that went with it, called I'll Be Here, was more successful because we took what we learned from Tony and we went back what made us successful with Royce and kind of the choir of the world techniques, and we tried to marry the two.
So there's a question posted here. I'm not exactly sure how to ask it, so I think I'm going to try to kind of interpret it. And that is, considering the fact that you guys have won 3 gold medals now, is that right?
We have won 4, 3 with me.
So has there been has the approach changed? Did the approach change after you've won, like in the following couple of years, or is there any sort of an aspect of guys resting on their laurels and you had to kind of kick some ass to get them back into shape, or the fact that they've achieved that, now they know how to do it, they know what it feels like to do that, and they can recreate that? How do you approach that?
I mean, honestly, it goes back to song choice. It's song choice. The times we did not win, other than also, in addition to some technical vocal things that prevented us from singing our best, because we had won previously, the goal was not necessarily to win again. The goal was to do something different artistically, continue to evolve the chorus. We wanted to win, and the goal was to win, but there were also these kind of, winning was secondary, versus then we lost and we said, no, we want to win. And the art and the evolution of the chorus was secondary to winning. But what's funny is I feel like there was more evolution when we won because of just the process we went on. In terms of just keeping, our guys are super motivated, and so when it comes to contests, they get ready to go. But it goes back to, I think I mentioned earlier, retraining new guys. And like I said, we recalibrate everything once a quarter, twice a year maybe.
So you mentioned a minute ago, you said a lot of times the success that you have is really related to song choice. and how you pick the repertoire for those, for the chorus. Is there anything you can talk about how you go about selecting things for them, and what do you do when you pick one and you guys are working on it and it just isn't working?
That's a great question. I have a great answer for you. So Theo Hicks arranged a ballad for us. It was, actually, I'm going to go a little further back. Leading into the 2018 International, we had 4 songs that we had chosen. Somewhere Out There from American Tail, Somewhere Out There. A song called With You from the musical Pippin. I See the Light from Disney's Tangled. And unless I see the light, and I'll Be Here from the off-Broadway musical The Wild Party. I sent all 4 of them to Dave Wright. He's like, I don't want to arrange Somewhere Out There because Kevin Keller arranged it for Musical Island Boys, and I coached them on it, and I just don't want to do it. Any of the other 3 are great. I go, cool. Thanks for helping making our decision easier. We have 3 left still. We decided not to do I See the Light because After Hours had done an arrangement a year or 2 prior, so we were left with 2. That was With You from Pippin and I'll Be Here. And we had difficulty deciding, and we said, hey, what would we prefer? A song with a metaphorical, maybe hard to sell lyric, but a really beautiful and really haunting harmonic theme. Or fairly simple harmony, fairly simple melody, really easy message. And the music team was like, we want the melody, we want the harmony, we'll figure out how to sell the message, the metaphor, the poetry. So that was With You, which we did in Orlando. So then said, okay, well, we still have 2 songs. Let's go back to the 3. We don't want to do Summer Out There. Let's do the Disney one. So we had Theo arrange I See the Light. And we actually performed it at National ACDA in Kansas City. And it's a great arrangement, but it wasn't clicking for some reason. Maybe it was the learning tracks. We went to talk about learning tracks earlier. Maybe it was just the way that was sung, and the guys didn't like the way that the learning track was sung, and they weren't learning it, and it's like pulling teeth to rehearse. And so somewhere in like November or December, we said, we need a plan B. And at that point, getting an Aaron Dale, a David Wright, Theo to go back and arrange another one, it's just not in the cards. So I was like, well, I'll try it. So I arranged the 4th option was this I'll Be Here. And I knew that was a good idea because at that time I knew I was moving to Oregon. And I listened to Theo's learning track, and it didn't do anything for me. And then I popped in the Broadway recording of The Wild Party and just wept. And I'm like, all right, I got to finish that arrangement. And it worked. And I think the guys bought into it because I arranged it. It was a song that was it's a message that was very direct. And it kind of turned it out that even though we thought, oh no, the melody would be good, and how great would the lead section sing this melody, but the message was hard to sell. So it ultimately came down to, if the message is easy to sell, that's going to be the winner.
So you just mentioned, like in that cycle, you had 4 songs that you wanted to start with. How did you come up with those to begin with? Were they all your ideas? Have you got a team of guys that are just like always throwing some stuff out to say this might be a good one for us? Or what's the process?
They're mostly mine. There is a team also, 4 or 5 guys that have been in the chorus for a really long time that have had success in quartets and stuff, that know kind of the history of the society and know what kind of songs. Like there was a young guy who's a great musician and kind of a relatively new barbershop and really smart dude, but would always like submit songs. You're like, why do you think that would be a good contest? Like, what makes you think this sad indie rock song would be a good idea? So yeah, I mostly throw the ideas. Sometimes will be suggested to me. and we just tend to bounce ideas off each other. But again, the buck stops with me. I mentioned "Oh Love That Will Not Let Me Go" a little while ago. That was one that I really wanted to do, and a couple of those guys in that group of friends were like, this might be a little bit too religious. And I'm like, yeah, but it just says cross one time. It only says cross once. We can like sing, yeah. And it ended up being a big thing. So yeah, it's just, again, going with your gut.
Yeah, we did that one 5 or 6 years ago, and it was my favorite at the time, even though it, like you said, it was had a religious aspect to it. I see one final question we haven't asked up here on the chat. So guys, if you have anything more, pop them in real quick, and then we can let Justin go. We've already kept him 30 minutes longer than we promised. Zach asked, how do you juggle contests and shows?
Where am I gonna go?
Good point, but I don't want to keep you from family. How do you juggle contests and shows if they're closely scheduled together?
Well, we will. I mean, you have to look far enough in advance, right? You have to think out, a year, 18 months, 2 years in advance. And so we will often try to plan our shows like the big. We might have smaller performances at a church, some sort of community performance art series or whatever. But our big shows, we will plan in a place that will give us the most leverage to then act as a launch pad into contest. This past year, we actually, I mentioned we normally do a big retreat. We like go up into the mountains, and to a camp, and have this big retreat in June. And so we thought, okay, well, if we did like the show late April, early May, then that would give us enough time to then redirect towards contest, and then we'd be like really prepared so the retreat would just really skyrocket us. But then what happened was that if that retreat was early June, then we'd have the rest of June to just be like, why can't it just be here already? And then we kind of felt this dip. So what we did last year actually was our retreat was maybe a week before we left for international, and our show was that weekend also. So we had a Friday night rehearsal and then a Saturday all-day rehearsal, and then we did a show that night. So the guys were maybe vocally tired, but it was like this, like boom, 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 do the show, go to international, go. And we had all season to prepare the repertoire, some of which we had, and because we had planned smaller performances earlier in the year, we could then like premiere songs as it went. So we had ACDA in February where we had to do 5 or 6 songs. Then maybe we had a show in late March where we had another one prepared. So that we kind of premiering them and doing some smaller performances of these pieces, so that by the time we got to our big show, pretty much everything was ready to go. Pretty much. There were still, I mentioned earlier this, you're always scrambling. There were 2 pieces that were like, are these gonna come together? One of them was a throwback, Acquire the World piece. Actually, I think you guys did it. Did you guys do the early American up-tempo medley a couple years ago? Pickle, 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 punk. Is that you guys? Thinking of another course. And then this other kind of Broadway like show that was fine on stage, but we were sweating beforehand.
So you mentioned earlier, you were talking about the attendance policy for each of these little sprints that you guys have. You have to kick off, and then you guys have, 7 out of 10 is required. You mentioned that you've had shows along the way. You said you did ACDA in February, and then you had another show in late March. Is there an expectation for those shows as far as attendance is concerned, along with those, sprints, if you will? And I mean, do you have a certain number of shows a year that you guys set that schedule a year in advance, and you're required, if you're a member, you're required to be at the show? Or how do you work around that to make sure that you have a representative sound at every show?
Yeah, the 7-10 thing was mostly for big things. ACDA had one. There was probably another show somewhere in the middle of spring. So there would have been a second 7:10, but then actually, ACDA may have been in a position where then 7:10 could have started for the show. I could be wrong, but no. So again, that's a section leader's responsibility to kind of get on the phone and make sure that, hey, are you accountable? I mean, I don't know. We use what's that service?
Talking about Groupanizer?
Groupanizer, yeah. So we use that so the guys can, yeah, I'll be there. And then if they're not, the section leader can get on their butt and say, hey, why aren't you going to be there? We really need you there, and apply some peer pressure so they can be there. So that's it. It's a lot of peer pressure. It goes back to the fraternity atmosphere. You don't want to let the chorus down. And so it's easy to, when you have that kind of culture and everybody's a friend, it's easy to say, hey man, like we really need you there. And then if the excuse is legit enough, then a guy can back off. But if they're just, oh, I'm taking a little bit of a break, it's like, well, don't be such a wuss. We need you. Take a break after international.
So do you guys, financially, do you guys make most of your money off of the shows that you guys do, or are you raising funds outside of that, or how are you, how do you make it?
I would say most of our budget comes from charitable donations.
Okay. And are they looking for grants? Do you have a team that does that, or how do they go about?
No, they're mostly just charitable donations. They're mostly just
people who enjoy you and just are cutting you a check.
Yeah, friends and family and local barbershoppers, and we get because the Harmony Foundation does a certain percentage can go back to the chapter, and so there's a lot of people that give back to us. Some people that are affiliated, and some people that aren't. There's just some barbershoppers that are like, oh, I like Westminster, I'm going to give money to them. Great.
Sure. Eric was asking, how often do you meet outside of rehearsal with your team, and how involved is the board?
The board is very involved. We use WhatsApp a lot. Some people are familiar with WhatsApp. And so there's groups for all sorts of things. There's a music team group, there's a board group, there's a leadership group, which is both the music team and the board. Actually, at a certain point, I said, cut me out of all of them. I can be on one. And it said, you can stay in the music team one. I'm like, great. So that I know the board and the leadership WhatsApps are very active. The board meets once a month. We will have at least once a year a meeting where the board and the music team will get together for some long-term planning stuff, debriefing. We'll do some SWOT analysis, those kinds of things. Kind of a leadership retreat, if you will. The music team meets weekly during break, whether that be just talking or that's when also our auditions will occur. It's kind of during the break, during the rehearsal, sometimes afterwards, but the music team meets for 5, 10, 15 minutes pretty much every week.
And is that just
also has WhatsApp?
Sorry, I dropped my headphones for a second. Is the music team meeting before rehearsal, after rehearsal? When do they meet? Oh,
generally during the break, sometimes afterwards.
Okay.
And if it's an important thing where we're like, we need to find more time, then we'll try to go before. But before is hard in LA just because of the traffic. Because we rehearse in Anaheim, and for those of you who are familiar, that's where Disneyland is. It's 40-ish minutes or 30-40 miles south of LA. So anybody's coming from LA, it's just kind of a nightmare to try to make it early. Luckily, by the time rehearsal is, traffic has waned a little bit, so it's not just the most awful commute ever, but it's still pretty bad.
Oh, it still sucks. I lived up there for 5 years. I don't miss it.
Scott, I had a quick question. You talked about kind of your target demographic, or what you tend to see walk in the door is, the 20s and 30s somethings. So do you find that finances are impacted when you kind of let them know what the dues are and that kind of thing, or how do you respond to that for people that are?
Yeah, I mean, our dues are our chapter dues are low. I think the chapter dues are only $15. of course, the side dues can sometimes be impactful. And then the expenses for international, that's part of a membership packet that they get when they first come, where it's like, these are what the dues are, we go to contests often, and this is about what they normally are. You can generally plan to, spend $1,000 easy. And that's if you're, probably going forward a room. But we also know, because the demographic, and I said we have some very reliable and generous patrons, so that we can often create a little angel fund and get scholarships for people to go to international. Sometimes it's a gift, and sometimes it's more of a loan. Like, the guys have to pay the course back over time. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And when they don't, we just kind of, write it off.
How about retreats? Is that something where each member is responsible for the cost of the retreat, or does the chorus pick that up? How does that work?
I think it depends on how flush the budget is. Sometimes, I know 2 years ago, before Orlando in 2018, I think guys had to pay for everything. This last year, because we didn't do a big retreat where we went to the mountains. It was just we did our show at USC, and so our retreat was using some of the USC facilities. And so, because it was just kind of a rental of facilities, the course just covered that. So it kind of depends. I know in years past, years ago, when the course was smaller, and the retreat was kind of covered at times, but it's a year-to-year thing.
All right, guys, that's everything that. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I had one more real quick. Are there other people in the chorus, music team, or otherwise that run different parts of the rehearsal, and how do you?
I mostly run everything except for sectionals and visual stuff. Generally, when it's someone teaching the visual stuff, somebody else will teach it because they had a hand in creating it. But even then, my visual people are really incredible, but they are talkers, and I try to keep a very fast tempo in rehearsal. So sometimes they're like, "Cool, thanks. Let's run it now." Okay, it was that. Do that again. 5, 6, 7, 8. Do it again. Which they're like, no. I'm like, you can move it with yourself. Sometimes I will have someone that I trust do warm-ups. My lead section leader, who's one of the assistant directors as well. I will sometimes ask him to lead warm-ups. Sometimes one of the presentation guys, I will ask them to do visual, spiritual energy kind of thing at the beginning. But when that happens, it's because maybe traffic was particularly bad and people are slow to arrive, and that can put me in a bad mood. And so I don't want that bad mood to permeate the start of rehearsal. So I ask somebody else to step in, so that by the time warm-ups are done and I'm up there, we have a contingency of the chorus and I'm in a good mood.
I'm not sure. So tell me about performance things. How do you find them? Do you have one that you typically perform at regularly, and so the audience knows where it is, or do you rotate, or how does that work?
Yeah, we tend to rotate. We've kind of had bad luck with venues. Like we found this really great church that we liked, had a really great acoustic, but then they decided to limit when they could rent it out, and so it no longer became an option. We've gone to USC a couple of times, and that's ended up being a really good venue. We didn't go back there. We had really two like sellout shows there. It was really, really great. but we made the mistake of also having an afterglow on campus that cost too much. I think that just soured us for a really long time. If there is a venue that we've gone back to, it's been Boulevard Auditorium in USC. You didn't unmute yourself.
Sorry, Matthew was asking regarding wardrobe and costume. They've evolved quite a bit over the last 10 years. Can you speak to that? And do you change over a period of time or contest specific, or things start to feel stale, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, so mainly just when things feel stale. I mean, sometimes we're contest specific, like both Seize the Day and From the One had kind of a specific look that we asked guys to go find. And we had a couple of men that were responsible for signing people off. Like some people would come and be like, this is it, right? And like, you look awful. Like, why do you think that's it? But it's the same guys that wear, suspenders and a belt at the same time. So I'm sorry if anybody does that.
You mean that's a problem?
Yeah, right. So that would be content specific, and then the general look. We've kind of had suits over the years. We have a lady, Jackie Palmquist, who's also done the wardrobe for Masters, who's pretty much been responsible for it all. But what would happen is because she did it and she kind of kept inventory of everything. When someone would leave and new people would come in, she would kind of mix and match pants and jackets. Oh, this fits here, so I'll take this one and do this one. And then over time, it just kind of devolves to a point where like this no longer looks good. So we're gonna have to. So we got suits like when we first hit it big in 2006, and then we got different but still black 3-piece suits in 2010, and we used those same 3-piece suits for several years until our trailer where all the suits were in got stolen. And so then we got these cool kind of blue tuxedo-y things, which that was a nightmare. But we still use that. But I imagine we're not going to wear that for a long time just because of the nightmare. Like there was some sort of strike in China where they were manufactured, so it took forever to get it to us. And once we got it, it was the wrong thing. And like I picked it out because like, oh, this looks so good, but it's like a super slim fitting suit. And some of our guys are not super slim fitting, and so it doesn't look great on everybody. But it looks really sharp.
Guys, anything final before we cut Justin loose? We've kept him almost 2 hours.
Just want to say thanks again. That was awesome. Lots of great information here.
Yeah, of course.
I'm
happy to do it.
I'm hopeful maybe I can reach out, pick your brain maybe offline about a couple of things, and I'll shoot you an email about possibly getting that format from you.
Oh yeah, sure.
Format. And really good stuff. And thanks for being flexible with us. We appreciate your time for sure.
You got it, man.
Hey, Justin, real quick. Earlier, you mentioned something about one of the guys who was like, you had a number of actors that were in the group, and you said one of them wrote something. It was almost like a treatise, if you will. You said, is that something that was specific to something you were working on, or is that something that? No,
it's just something he was working on for a while. I think he's selling it on Amazon. Let me hold on. Let me just get out of full screen mode here.
Do you think a lot of the information in there is still relevant? I mean, if he is selling it on Amazon, would it be worth taking a look at?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a textbook. Hold on.
Sorry. You don't have to look at it now. I mean, you could always follow up with Brent on it if you did find it, but.
Yeah, I'll have to look for it. It's not coming up. Oh, wait. I found it. Yep. Yeah, no, I think he was just really like, really into it. And he's just kind of a, I'm putting it in the chat here. Oh, he's just kind of an actor, but also kind of an academic mind. And so he put this thing together and yeah, and I think he's selling it, but I think it's all pretty much going back to the chorus.
You know, I don't know if we could afford $9.99.
I know, it's pretty steep.
One final question before we let you go. Katie just asked, what keeps you motivated and having fun?
New stuff, new music keeps me going, and people. But I'm kind of an introvert, so I'm going to say the music.
So now that you're in Oregon, what's your next challenge?
Actually, I never finished my master's. So I got up here, got a job. It was okay, but there's a really great program and a really great mentor at Portland State University. So I'm going to finish my master's. So that's my next thing. And then relative to barbershop, I have no idea. We'll see.
The rotation. Got it. Guys, anything final before we let Justin go? All right, Justin, this has been really awesome. We really appreciate it. And I really apologize.
You're
for
welcome.
an hour over, but it's been useful, and we will pour back over the notes here, and probably Brent may have a couple of follow-up questions for you if you don't mind him asking, and really appreciate your time.
Of course, my pleasure. Hey, have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Just let the horses run, Brent.
Thank you all for letting me hang out. It was good to see you guys.
Sure.
Hey,
Yeah,
good to
you
see you
guys-
too.
Thanks for coming.
We're on Tuesdays if you get bored, but it's just me. I mean, not as fancy as Justin.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody.
All right.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye, Katie.
Did you stop the recording, Scott?
No, I haven't yet, in case there's anything we want to cover.
All right.
If we're just going to have a grad ass session, I can record it and I can stop it at any time.
Well, I'm not grabbing your ass, Scott. Sorry.
Guys, any takeaways from that? Anything you want to talk about?
Got
There's
7
no
pages
rhyme
in
or
notes.
reason. And it seems
A
like
lot of things that are
everyone-
similar to what we do, retreat-wise and stuff like that. But there's some definite differences.
Absolutely.
Yeah, every organization is very, very different in their approach, and a lot of different ways to be successful.
You know, it's really interesting to me. One of the very first things he started talking about was what made them different was the camaraderie. And, you know, the fact that guys will get together, even on non-rehearsal nights, they're just getting together just because they like one another and they want to hang out. And, you know, truth be told, that's something that we had for a long time, and I feel like we've kind of gotten away from it a little bit. Part of that is distance. Part of that is just, you know, we you know, have lives and, you know, everything else, but there's something to be said for times when you're not working together, just hanging out and having fun, to build camaraderie during the times that you do get together and work.
Agree.
Yep.
Brent, did you have anything you wanted to cover off on other than the session with Justin tonight?
No, don't have anything specific. Don't have somebody for next week just yet. Just be on the lookout.
Yeah, if you guys get a chance, check out BHS tomorrow. They're doing Greg Clancy.
I really like his books.
Yeah. What if Matthew? Do you happen to have that link, Andy, for that class?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of these, and as I mentioned earlier, while he's looking for that, Justin's also going to be on as a part of the Harmony University classes that are offered on Friday. I think he's going to be on June 19th. I don't believe any of them, there's not a charge for them, but they are asking you to register for the class. But it's, you click through it, you tell them your name and email address, I think. And then you're registered, and you're good to go at that point. But yeah, be looking on the lookout for some of these different clinicians and directors or different leaders, and jump in if you can. Friday evenings most of the time.
Sounds good.
Don't know if we had an occasion to officially congratulate Mr. Hilliard for his accomplishment of getting through everything. So very much congratulations to you, sir. And
Thank you. I appreciate it.
absolutely. Hopefully you get a direction to go before too long. Right?
I just
In
put
Texas,
the
though.
chat for the VHS artist.
Yeah, got it. Thanks. That's it for me. I'm hang out, Joe. Good to see you. Jack, how you doing? Good.
I'm hanging in there. Thank you.
I think I read your lips. But,
All right, guys.
well, thanks again. Thanks, Scott.
Yep.
You're
Eric, you want to
muted.
mention Saturday?
Those that are on here, most guys have already signed up. So we are moving all of our stuff out of the warehouse Saturday morning. So if you're going to be in town, want to throw some hands on some stuff to load into the trailer or pickup trucks to move into our new storage unit, which is about a half a mile away from the church. 9 o'clock in the morning at the warehouse. All right. And social distancing will be in place. Wear your mask. Bring your own what is it? Hand sanitizer, and shower, wash yourself.
That reminds me, I got to grab the trailer in the morning.
Right. All right. I will see you guys. Have a good one.
Go.
All right.
Adios.
Night, guys.